The knock came sharper than I expected. 3 hard raps, no pause. Like whoever stood there had already decided what my answer would be. I hadn't unpacked half the boxes yet, and the coffee on the counter had gone cold. When I opened the door, I froze. My parents stood on the porch, and beside them, Tara, arms crossed, jaw tight, pretending this was casual. No hi, no, how's Austin? Just silence, heavy enough to fill the hallway. Then my father lifted a folder. "Let's come in," he said. His tone wasn't a question. I stepped aside, still trying to understand why they were even here. They hadn't visited me in years, not once since I moved for work. My mother's eyes darted around the small living room, scanning every shelf like she was grading it. Tara dropped her purse on the sofa and sighed. "This is nice," she said, though her voice made it sound like the opposite. "What's going on?" I asked. Dad placed the folder on the coffee table. The papers inside were thick, creased, and marked with blue ink. Tara stood straighter, almost rehearsed. "It's about the boutique," she began. "The loan went bad. There's a balloon payment due next week, and the bank's threatening foreclosure." I blinked. "Foreclosure on what?" "Our parents' house," she said simply. "You know, the one we grew up in." The air left my chest. I sat down before I realized I had. Dad cleared his throat. "We co-signed, Clara. The bank says they'll take the property if it's not cleared soon." My mother added softly, "It was supposed to be temporary, honey. Tara's business just hit a rough patch." Tara folded her arms. "You can easily cover it. You got that bonus, didn't you?" The words hit harder than I expected. I stared at her. "You went through my finances?" She shrugged. "You post your vacations, your new job. I figured you're doing well. It's just family helping family." I laughed once, quietly, though nothing felt funny. "Family helping family?" I repeated. "That's what this is?" Mom's eyes filled, always her weapon of choice. "Please, Clara, it's not just about money. We can't lose the house. It's where your father and I plan to retire." My father nodded, like this settled everything. "We thought you'd want to help." I picked up the folder. Numbers, signatures, late notices, and one clause circled in red. The balloon payment was obscene. My name wasn't anywhere, but both of theirs were. "How much exactly?" I asked. Tara shifted. 120,000. I looked at her directly. "You borrowed that much?" "It's complicated," she said. "I needed inventory, rebranding, advertising. You wouldn't understand." Maybe I wouldn't. Or maybe I understood too well, that she'd built her dream on other people's safety nets. I stood, closing the folder carefully. "I'll review everything and get back to you." Tara scoffed. "So now you're the family accountant?" "Something like that," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not sending a cent until I know what I'm paying for." Her expression hardened. "You're cold-hearted. You know that?" Maybe I was. Or maybe I'd learned that guilt doesn't pay interest. They left without hugging me. My mother lingered by the door, eyes red, whispering, "Don't take too long, sweetheart." When the door closed, the quiet hit like a wave. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty, just tired. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a folder. Family Loan Review. Inside it, a blank document. Case 001, the Rivera Debt. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For years, they had called me dramatic for wanting distance. But drama was never the problem. Dependency was. I opened the loan PDFs, cross-checked the signatures, and compared timestamps. The handwriting on Tara's line looked uneven, like she'd rushed or forged a correction. My stomach turned. A notification flashed on the corner of my screen. An email from Tara, timestamped 2 hours before they arrived. I clicked it. The subject line read, "Payment Plan." I didn't open it. Not yet. I stared at the glow of the screen, realizing something strange. I wasn't angry, just awake. That was new. I took a deep breath and leaned back, eyes on the ceiling fan. The sound of its slow rotation filled the silence. I had always been the one who kept peace, who apologized, who covered the difference. Maybe this was what peace actually felt like. Quiet, heavy, unsettling. I knew the next few days would test me. They'd call, cry, maybe threaten. But this time, I wanted the truth more than I wanted approval. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this. Because people like me, people who've spent years being the good one, we get told that boundaries are cruelty. But they're not. They're protection. If you've ever been the one blamed for not fixing everyone's mistakes, then you understand. So stay with me through this, because what came next changed everything. That's CTA 1, natural and emotional. I spent the evening gathering everything: bank statements, emails, Tara's boutique filings, old text messages where she bragged about her silent partners. Patterns emerged. Lies I hadn't wanted to see before were right there in black and white. By midnight, I'd highlighted every questionable transaction and tagged every inconsistency. Each one felt like peeling another layer off the version of family I'd been told to love without question. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how easily I'd believed they'd never betray me. I shut my laptop, poured a glass of water, and stared at the reflection in the window. The city lights outside blinked faintly, distant and indifferent. I whispered to myself, this time it's not guilt. It's data. My pulse slowed. Calm settled in like a decision already made. I thought about calling them, telling them I'd help, but only after I'd seen every document, every signature. Then I stopped. They wouldn't understand that kind of logic. To them, love meant surrender. To me, now, love meant truth. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, soft and too bright for how little I'd slept. I reached for my phone, ready to draft a reply, but a new notification appeared. Tara. Subject line, Monday. I opened it. Just one sentence. If you don't send the money by Monday, Mom and Dad will lose the house you grew up in. My hand froze above the screen, and for a moment, I felt nothing at all. The email began with guilt and ended with blackmail. This is your one chance to prove you're still family, Tara wrote. I stared at the screen, rereading every word. Every manipulative line meant to sound like concern. You're selfish. You've changed. You'll regret this. It was almost impressive how predictable she'd become. I didn't respond right away. I read it again, slower this time, letting the rhythm of her accusations wash over me until they felt hollow. My chest didn't tighten the way it used to. I didn't feel that old pull to defend myself. I just felt tired, tired of being the easy target. So I opened a new email, typed out 12 words, and hit send. Acknowledged, reviewing documentation. Meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. Cedar Stream Cafe. No apologies, no explanations. Just business. I copied both my parents on the thread. I knew Tara would hate that part most. The silence afterward felt strangely peaceful. It was the first time in years that I hadn't given them the reaction they wanted. I wasn't their emotional punching bag anymore. I was the one setting the terms. I picked up my phone and texted Evelyn March, my former supervisor who had quietly turned into my closest mentor. They've escalated. I've scheduled the final meeting. Her reply came almost instantly. Corner booth, newspaper, let them perform. Remember? Evidence over emotion. That last line made me smirk. Evelyn always knew how to pull me back from the edge. She never told me what I wanted to hear. She told me what I needed. I stood, walked over to my printer, and started feeding in the documents one by one. Loan statements, overdue notices, text screenshots, call logs. Everything that painted the picture of what my family had turned into. With a red pen, I circled interest rates that made no sense, highlighted Tara's late replies, and underlined every signature my parents claimed to barely remember signing. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. For the first time, I saw the full pattern, how they'd used guilt like currency. Every "you owe us" was just another withdrawal from the account of my silence. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Miles. He worked in my department, quiet, kind. The sort of man who noticed when you were too proud to ask for help. "Do you want me there tomorrow?" he asked. "I can play the bad guy if needed." I smiled without meaning to. "Thank you, Miles, but no, this is my audit. I have to be the one to unplug it." There was a pause before his next message. Then make sure they don't plug you back in. His words sat with me. I read them twice, then turned my phone face down. The house felt different that night. Not lonely, not even quiet, just steady. The kind of stillness that follows a decision you've avoided for too long. I opened the window, letting in the hum of Austin's city lights. Somewhere below, a car alarm chirped and fell silent again. It felt like the city was breathing with me. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who dropped everything to keep peace, who bent her schedule and her heart around their expectations. She'd never have written that email. She'd have apologized before anyone asked her to. But that girl didn't live here anymore. If you've ever been guilted into saving someone who never thanked you, you know what this feels like. You start to wonder if you're cruel for stepping back, when all you've really done is stop bleeding for people who never even noticed. Comment, I've been there. Let's see how many of us learned the hard way. I kept printing until the stack was complete, each sheet warm to the touch. Then I placed them in a folder marked Case 001. The label felt strangely satisfying, like I'd finally given form to something that had haunted me for years. When I was done, I sat by the window again. The city lights flickered off the glass, tracing faint reflections across the pages on my desk. I ran my finger over the first line of Tara's original email, the one that said, "Prove you're still family." It almost made me laugh. Family shouldn't be something you have to prove. I closed my laptop and poured a glass of water. The condensation ran down my hand as I leaned against the counter, watching the light shift across the kitchen. My mind felt calm, almost cold. There was no fear left, just focus. Tomorrow wasn't about forgiveness or money anymore. It was about boundaries. I wanted them to see what accountability looked like when the quiet one finally spoke up. I rehearsed nothing. I didn't need to. They'd come expecting guilt, tears, maybe even desperation. They'd perform their parts well. Mom with her trembling voice, Dad with his practiced disappointment, Tara with her casual superiority. But I wasn't their audience anymore. I was the record keeper. Before bed, I double-checked every file, packed the folder neatly, and laid out my clothes for the next day. Simple black slacks, a cream blouse, hair tied back. Nothing dramatic, just enough to look like the version of myself they'd underestimated. The clock on my nightstand read 11:47. I turned off the lamp, but sleep didn't come right away. My mind wandered to the cafe, to the smell of coffee and old wood, to the sound of Tara's impatient sighs. I wondered how long it would take before she realized the script had changed. And just before I drifted off, I thought of Evelyn's message again. Let them perform. The next afternoon, I walked into Cedar Stream Cafe early. The air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. A slow song played from an old radio near the counter. I scanned the room and saw her, Evelyn, already seated in the corner booth, a newspaper folded neatly beside her cup. For a second, I thought she was just early. But then I noticed the envelope on the table in front of her. My name was written on it, and the handwriting wasn't hers. Cedar Stream Cafe smelled like roasted beans and quiet judgment. I got there early, ordered black coffee I didn't plan to finish, and sat by the window. My reflection in the glass looked composed, almost detached, but beneath that calm, my heartbeat was steady and loud. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head for years, though I didn't realize it until now. Evelyn was already there, exactly where she said she'd be. Corner booth, newspaper folded beside her, her expression unreadable. When she saw me, she gave a small nod and went back to her coffee. Just that, a nod. It grounded me. The clock on my phone read 4:03 when the door opened. Tara walked in first, her voice already sharpened for the performance. "You didn't even answer my last message, Clara. Mom's been crying all morning." I motioned toward the table. "Sit down. Let's review the documents." They followed hesitantly, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline, my father keeping his eyes anywhere but on me. Tara dropped into the chair across from me, jaw tight, already defensive. I spread the papers across the table. The smell of ink and coffee mixed strangely in the air. Every page was marked in red. Interest rates circled, clauses underlined, signatures boxed. The visual was deliberate. I wanted the truth to be unavoidable. You used mom and dad as co-signers for a high-risk loan, I said, voice steady. Did you tell them what they were signing? Tara's eyes flicked toward our parents. My father shifted. My mother's lips trembled. No one spoke. Answer me, I said quietly. Tara's shoulders stiffened. We just needed help. You're making this so complicated. No, I replied, sliding one page toward her. I'm clarifying it. The words landed like a gavel. Silence followed. The kind that draws every eye in the cafe, even if no one dares look. My mother finally whispered, Clara, sweetheart, please don't do this here. Where then? I asked. You didn't seem to mind when she forged your safety under mine. Dad cleared his throat. We all make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, I interrupted, meeting his eyes for the first time. It was a choice. The hum of conversation around us faded. Evelyn folded her newspaper neatly and stood. I'll leave you to your audit, she said gently. Her tone made Tara flinch more than my words had. As she brushed past, she set a sealed envelope beside my cup. For you. Don't open it until you've finished. Then she walked away without looking back. For a moment, no one moved. Tara's gaze followed Evelyn to the door before turning on me, sharp and accusing. She's manipulating you. You think she cares about you? She's using you. I sipped my coffee, eyes steady on hers. Maybe, but at least she taught me to stop being your guarantee. Her face twisted. You think this makes you powerful? You're just as pathetic as you've always been, hiding behind rules and paperwork. I leaned in slightly. No, Tara, I just finally started reading the fine print. Her hand twitched toward the papers, and for a second, I thought she might back down. But instead, she grabbed the stack, crumpled one sheet, and hissed, You'll regret this. The sound of tearing filled the air. Pages split under her hands, red ink folding into white fragments across the table. My parents gasped softly, but I didn't move. I let her finish. When she was done, the table was littered with pieces, proof shredded by the same hands that created the debt. I picked up a torn half, smoothed it against the wood, and said quietly, No, Tara, you will, in writing. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I gathered the pieces one by one, not rushing, not looking at anyone. The paper cuts stung my fingers, but I didn't stop. Every movement felt deliberate, cleansing. My mother whispered my name, voice trembling. Clara, please. She didn't mean... She meant every word, I said softly. She always does. For a moment, the air felt heavy enough to choke on. Tara looked ready to speak again, but my silence held. I stacked the torn papers neatly, slid them back into the folder, and tucked it under my arm. Then I stood. I'll send copies of everything to the bank tomorrow, I said. They'll know who actually owes what. Dad's voice cracked slightly. You're turning on your own family. I met his eyes, steady and calm. I'm just stopping the habit of being their collateral. No one followed me when I walked out. The bell above the door chimed once, soft and final. The late afternoon light hit my face, warm but distant. I didn't look back. Outside, I paused near the window. Through the glass, I saw Tara still sitting there, jaw tight, eyes furious. Mom's hand hovered near her shoulder, but she didn't touch her. Dad stared at the table like it might rewrite itself. Inside that small cafe, I had just broken the rhythm of decades. The folder in my hands felt heavier than before, not with guilt, but with proof. And somewhere under that weight was Evelyn's envelope, still sealed, still waiting. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some things deserve silence before answers. I didn't open the envelope that night. It sat on my desk, plain and silent, while I boiled water for tea. The apartment felt heavier than usual, not with fear, but with something closer to finality. I'd faced them and walked away still standing. That was new. The clock ticked somewhere behind me, steady and patient, waiting for me to decide what kind of person I was now. I carried the tea to my desk and sat down. The torn loan papers were spread out where I'd left them. I scanned every page, flattened the wrinkles, and fed them through the printer's tray one by one until they came back as digital files. I saved the folder under Family Debt Evidence. Naming it that way felt almost ceremonial. I'd turned their chaos into something measurable. The envelope stayed in my peripheral vision the whole time. White, sealed, quiet. I tried to ignore it, but it pulled at my attention like gravity. When I finally reached for it, my hands didn't shake. The paper tore cleanly. No hesitation, no trembling. Inside was one sheet. Evelyn's handwriting filled it, sharp and deliberate. They'll push again. When they do, don't react, document, date, respond in writing. Your receipts will rewrite their story. Underneath, a small black card slid out, silver lettering catching the light. March Holdings, personal client access. At the bottom, a note in smaller writing read, "Consider this your backup. You've earned it." I stared at the words until they blurred. It wasn't money. It wasn't rescue. It was something else entirely. Access. Security. Evelyn wasn't saving me. She was preparing me. For a while, I just sat there, the cup cooling beside me. I thought about the years I'd spent earning people's approval only to realize it had no currency. This was the opposite of approval. This was validation. The phone buzzed beside me, pulling me back. A message from my mother. "Tara's crying. She says you humiliated her. We're staying at a hotel until this is resolved." I stared at the text for a long time, feeling the familiar ache crawl up my chest. That reflex to fix, to explain, to apologize. But it faded quickly. I opened the message window, typed slowly, and sent, "That's your choice. I provided every fact. My answer hasn't changed." I didn't wait for the dots to appear. I muted the chat, swiped away the notifications, and set the phone face down. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. Lights flickered across the skyline, tiny proof that life went on whether I carried guilt or not. My reflection in the glass didn't look like the woman who once begged to be heard. She looked steady. And maybe that's the thing about control. It always pretends to be love. If you've ever realized someone's help was just control disguised as care, then you'll understand why I didn't answer that call. Comment below. I'm reading every story. I sat back down and ran my fingers along the edge of the business card. "Backup," she'd written. Not escape, not rescue. Backup. The difference mattered. It meant Evelyn trusted me to handle this myself. She was just giving me tools, not solutions. It made me think of every conversation I'd ever had with Tara. Every "you owe me," every "you're selfish," every guilt-laced favor. They were all the same lesson, just taught through pain. I hadn't learned it then, but I understood it now. Power isn't loud. It's quiet, calm, and patient. The kettle clicked off behind me, forgotten. I poured what was left of the warm water into the sink, then returned to my desk. The black card caught the dim light, its silver letters faintly glowing. I placed it beside the printed evidence and closed my laptop. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone, not even Evelyn. I knew what came next. Documentation, dates, proof. Nothing emotional, nothing impulsive. Just truth in writing. I made a note on a sticky pad. Bank contact, cross-check loan reference, verify signatures. I stuck it on my monitor, then turned off the desk lamp. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. As I walked toward my bedroom, I glanced back at the desk. The envelope, now empty, lay beside the folder labeled Evidence. Two small symbols of a much larger shift. One represented what they'd tried to take from me. The other, what I'd finally reclaimed. I crawled into bed and let the darkness settle around me. My body was still, but my mind kept tracing Evelyn's words. Your receipts will rewrite their story. Maybe that's what real freedom looks like. When you stop arguing and start recording. I woke before sunrise. The light coming through the blinds was thin, cold, but clear. I made coffee instead of tea this time. My nerves were calm, almost rehearsed. When my office phone rang later that morning, I recognized the number on the screen. It wasn't my family. It was the bank. The voice on the line was polite but urgent. Ms. James, we'd like to discuss an account linked to your parents' loan. My fingers tightened around the mug. I see, I said quietly. I've been expecting your call. The call came mid-morning, just as I was reviewing a quarterly report. The number on the screen wasn't familiar, but something about it made me pick up anyway. Good morning, this is Mark Davis from First State Bank. We need to verify some details regarding a co-signed loan. His tone was polite, careful, the way people sound when they already know something's wrong. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Go ahead, I said. He read off the loan ID. The numbers were the same as the ones on Tara's paperwork. I recognized them instantly. Yes, I said calmly. I'm aware of that loan. There was a pause. And you're confirming your role as a cosigner? No, I replied. I am not a party to that loan. He hesitated, papers shuffling faintly on his end. There seems to be a note in your parents' file suggesting you'd handle it. I took a quiet breath. That note wasn't from me. I'd like that record flagged for misrepresentation. The silence stretched just long enough for me to imagine him adjusting his glasses. Understood, Ms. James. I'll make that note immediately. Thank you, I said softly. Please send me a confirmation in writing. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the monitor. I should have been angry, but all I felt was an odd stillness. They had done it again, used my name, my reliability, as their safety net. But this time, they'd crossed into something more than emotional manipulation. This was legal. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. The bank had believed them without ever asking me. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was erasure. Like my consent didn't matter. I opened my email and typed one line to Evelyn. The bank contacted me. They're trying to rope me in legally. Her reply came minutes later. Good, now you have their trace. Every story needs a paper trail. I sat there reading her words over and over. She was right. Proof was no longer just about defense. It was about authorship. If they wanted to write lies with my name, I'd start keeping my own version of the record. So that's what I did. I created a new folder on my desktop. Proof Archive 1. Misrepresentation. The name alone steadied me. I uploaded every document, every email, every screenshot. I saved the bank's call log and timestamp. Even the recording of their voicemail went in. One by one, I built the archive. It looked cold, clinical, but it was mine. As I organized the files, something strange happened. The guilt I'd carried for months began to fade, replaced by precision. It felt like drawing a clean line across years of blurred boundaries. When I was done, I closed the laptop and leaned against my desk. The sunlight through the blinds cast thin bars of gold across the room. I exhaled slowly, realizing that for the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to explain themselves. I was documenting them. Have you ever found out someone used your name to save their mess? That moment when you realize they didn't see your kindness, just your convenience? Comment, I remember if you've been there. Tell me how you handled it. I looked around my office. The space had always felt temporary, like I was still deciding whether I deserved it. But right then, it felt earned. Every framed certificate, every quiet morning spent cleaning up someone else's mistakes had led here, to this exact point. I thought about Tara's voice at the cafe, sharp and trembling, about my mother's guilt-ridden messages, about my father's silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. They had counted on me to stay quiet, dependable, predictable. But what happens when the quiet one keeps receipts? That night, I poured a glass of water, turned off my phone, and opened the archive again. The folder gleamed on the screen like a small, glowing fortress. Inside it, truth sat still and unbothered. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt recorded, documented, safe. I closed my laptop, walked to the window, and watched the city hum below. The sound of traffic blended with the faint tapping of rain against the glass. I thought about Evelyn's words again. Every story needs a paper trail. Maybe that was the lesson. Not to fight louder, but to keep better records. When I finally crawled into bed, my phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I almost ignored it. But something made me look. A new email. Tara's name in the sender line. The subject read, "Listen." I hesitated before opening it. Inside, there was a single attachment, not a document, a voice file. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the dark room, trembling between sobs. "She's tearing the family apart, Tara. You can't let her do this." The recording ended with silence, the kind that stays with you long after the sound fades. I played the recording twice before I could breathe. My mother's voice trembled through the speakers, soaked in tears. "You don't know what your sister's going through. We could lose everything. Why are you doing this to us?" The words hit like an echo from another lifetime. They used to work on me, every single time. They were my obedience trigger, the guilt switch that made me fold. But not tonight. I sat still, the dim glow of my desk lamp stretching across the floor. I could almost see the pattern now, how every plea, every tear, was a transaction disguised as love. I opened my email, attached the recording, and sent it to Evelyn. The subject line was simple: "Emotional extortion attempt logged." Her reply came less than a minute later. "Perfect. Next step." Neutral response. "No emotion, just documentation." It was such a small sentence, but it gave me permission to breathe. So I did what no one in my family had ever done. I replied with facts. My email read, "Dear Mom, I understand you're upset. The loan in question was never disclosed to me before default. The bank has confirmed my non-involvement. Any further pressure to transfer funds will be treated as a misrepresentation attempt. Love, Clara." I stared at the words for a moment before hitting send. No shaking hands, no second guessing, just clarity. The sound of the whoosh from my outbox felt final, like a quiet kind of justice. I leaned back and looked out the window. The city lights blurred against the glass, soft and distant. My phone buzzed again, this time from Miles. "Tara's spreading things around," he said as soon as I answered. "She told people you're refusing to save your parents." I almost smiled. "She's welcome to her version," I said calmly. "I have mine in writing." There was silence on the line, then a small laugh. "You're something else, Clara." "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe I'm just finally done being used." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I thought about how many times I'd been pulled back into their chaos, thinking I could fix what they broke. I used to believe love meant rescuing people from their own consequences. Now I understood that real love sometimes meant stepping back and letting truth speak for itself. I poured a glass of water and watched the surface ripple. The reflection of the city shimmered inside it, shifting like memory. Revenge, I realized, wasn't always fire. Sometimes it was absence, the space where guilt used to live. I walked back to my desk and opened the envelope Evelyn had given me. I'd almost forgotten about it, but something told me it wasn't just a business card. I slid the card from its frame, and sure enough, another folded note was hidden behind it. I unfolded it slowly. In Evelyn's clean handwriting, it read, "Stage 2, Public Transparency." I smiled before I even understood why. It wasn't fear that I felt. It was alignment. The audit was over. The exposure was next. The air in the apartment felt lighter, sharper somehow. I set the note beside my laptop and exhaled. For the first time in years, my pulse didn't race from defending myself. It beat quietly, evenly, like it belonged to someone in control of her own story. If you've ever had to choose peace over pleasing people, you know this feeling. You know what it's like to trade chaos for silence, and to finally realize how much that silence costs. Hit subscribe. You'll relate to what happens next. Before bed, I looked around the room, taking in the stillness. Everything felt deliberate. The clean desk, the muted light, the cup beside me half finished but steady. My world had shrunk, but it finally felt mine. Then my phone vibrated once, a low hum that pulled me back, a new notification. I turned the screen over and froze. It was a public post from Tara's business page. Her words splashed across my screen in bold. "My own sister, Clara James, abandoned our parents for money." And below it, she'd tagged me by name. When I saw the notification, my throat went dry. Not from fear, but from recognition. Tara's name flashed across my screen, bright and familiar like a bruise you've stopped treating, but still notice every time it aches. Her boutique's business page had posted something long, emotional, and theatrical. The title read, "When Family Turns Their Back." And right there, under the first line, was my name. I clicked it. The post began, "Some people forget who raised them once they taste success. My sister has left our parents drowning in debt while pretending to be a saint. We never asked for much, only for love." I read it. Twice. My name was tagged in blue, glowing like a wound in front of hundreds of strangers. Comments poured in beneath it. Sympathy for her, judgment for me. Words like heartless, ungrateful, how could she? Stacked one after another, the kind of digital righteousness that thrives on half a story. Old coworkers chimed in. A few people from our hometown church left lines that started with prayers and ended with condemnation. Even one of my mother's friends wrote, "Such a shame. She was always the quiet one. It should have hurt. It didn't. Not this time." I scrolled once more, then clicked Save Post. The little gray checkmark appeared beside it, mechanical and cold. Then I opened my folder, Proof Archive 1. I took screenshots, saved timestamps, copied URLs. Each cruel comment became evidence. Every sentence that once could have broken me turned into another file. By late afternoon, I had documented everything. I renamed the folder Public Misrepresentation. The word public made my stomach settle. It meant I wasn't hiding anymore. That evening, I met Evelyn at a small diner off the main road. She was already there, sipping black coffee, watching the window's reflection more than the room itself. I slid into the booth across from her, my hands still cold from the air outside. "You were right," I said quietly. "They've gone public." Evelyn didn't flinch. She stirred her coffee once, slow and deliberate. "Then so will you," she said, her voice calm. "But not with words, with documentation." I looked at her, confused for a second. "You mean?" She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small silver USB drive. She set it between us. "This contains every verified record of your sister's business filings, including the unpaid tax notices." The air between us tightened. I stared at it. "You're telling me to post it?" "No," she said evenly, looking up. "I'm telling you to share clarity. You don't need to destroy her, Clara. Just show the truth and let silence finish the job." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I sat there for another hour, watching my reflection in the diner window. The neon sign outside flickered. Open, closed, open, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Maybe I knew that feeling too well. When I got home, the glow of my computer filled the room. I opened Tara's post again. It already had over 400 reactions. Heart emojis, sad faces, praying hands. For every lie she told, there were a dozen people offering her sympathy. But what they didn't know was that sympathy without context is just ignorance dressed in kindness. I clicked on the folder I'd built, the one full of bank records, legal emails, and the document proving my non-involvement. I opened each file one by one, checking the dates, the seals, the correspondence. Everything lined up perfectly. I didn't rush. I wanted my calm to be the loudest thing about me. By the time I was ready, the night had turned silent. Even the city seemed to be waiting. I opened a blank post. My fingers hovered above the keyboard for a long time. My breath slowed, steady. I typed only one sentence. "Transparency always finds its way home. No hashtags, no explanation, just truth, with no noise." Then I attached one file, the official legal advisory from the bank confirming I was never part of their loan, and pressed post. The upload bar filled slowly, like time holding its breath. For a brief second, I closed my eyes. I thought about every moment they'd told me to stay quiet for the sake of family. Every time I'd swallowed anger because being the calm one was easier than being right. Not anymore. The screen blinked once. The post went live. I didn't refresh. I didn't check comments. I didn't need to. I'd already done what they never expected. I'd stopped defending myself and started documenting them. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows. Faint, but certain. The kind of sound that follows endings and the start of something cleaner. Some truths don't need witnesses. They just need daylight. My post didn't explode right away. It simmered, quiet at first, like rain before a flood. A few confused comments appeared under Tara's thread, people asking what was going on. Then hours later, one comment changed everything. "I work at the bank," the woman wrote. "Clara's not on the loan. You all owe her an apology." I read it twice, barely breathing. That single sentence felt like a door unlocking. Within an hour, the tone online began to shift. Some deleted their comments. Others apologized publicly, though their words came coated in discomfort. "Didn't know the full story. Guess I jumped too soon." Then another post appeared, this time from a customer. "Still waiting for my refund from Tara's boutique," she wrote, attaching screenshots of ignored messages and order receipts. More followed. More stories. By afternoon, Tara's boutique page started losing followers in waves. I didn't feel joy, not really. Just a calm sort of gravity, like truth had finally remembered my address. I muted the notifications, closed my phone, and poured myself a cup of coffee. The morning light spilled through the window, soft and steady. Outside, Austin smelled like rain and clean air, the kind that only shows up after a long storm. For the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I felt witnessed. Later that day, my phone rang again. My father's number. I hesitated before answering. His voice was low, almost fragile. "You embarrassed us," he said. I kept my tone gentle. "No, Dad," I said quietly. "I documented us." There was nothing on the other end, just silence, long and heavy, the kind that made its own kind of ending. Then he hung up. I sat there for a while, staring at the mug in my hand. The steam had faded, but the warmth remained. It felt symbolic somehow. Not heat, just quiet endurance. That evening, Miles showed up at my door. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, like he was searching for signs of damage. "You okay?" he finally added. I nodded and looked out toward the skyline. "Better than okay," I said. "For the first time, I don't feel responsible for their story." He exhaled, shoulders softening. "Good," he said. "Because you didn't ruin anything, Clara. You reset it." We sat together for a while. No words, no pressure. Just that stillness that only comes after something breaks and you stop trying to glue it back together. The silence felt earned. When he left, I stayed by the window. The sky had gone deep blue, the city lights blinking like distant thoughts. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder one last time. The archive that had held every piece of this war. The files looked neat, precise, almost sterile. I renamed it, Case Closed, The Rivera Audit. The title looked right, not angry, not bitter, just final. I saved it to the cloud, then closed the laptop. My reflection in the dark screen stared back at me, calm and unfamiliar. I whispered, "No more rescues. No more receipts." The words tasted clean. That night I slept without checking my phone, without wondering who was talking about me. The city hummed softly outside, and for once it didn't sound like judgment. It sounded like closure. The next morning, a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. The courier handed me a small envelope, embossed, official-looking, marked confidential. My name written neatly in ink I recognized. Evelyn. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once, deliberate and crisp. At the center, in her handwriting, just one line. Stage 3, the inheritance audit. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Gold embossing at the top corner read, March Holdings, Legal Division. I traced the letters with my thumb before opening it. The paper inside so smooth it almost felt like it was judging me for shaking. Inside was a single page, clean, clinical, titled Preliminary Audit, Estate Transfer Rivera Family Holdings. I read it once, then again. By the third line, my chest felt tight. It said my parents' house, the one Tara used as collateral, had been originally held in my name, then quietly transferred years ago under a clause I'd never signed. At the bottom, written in Evelyn's neat, sharp handwriting, was a single sentence. You never lost your home. It was taken from you on paper. Let's fix that. For a long time, I just sat there. The morning light hit the letter like it wanted to expose every memory I'd buried to keep peace. I opened my laptop and went straight to my archive. Old folders, old emails, forgotten attachments. Years of family paperwork I'd saved but never really looked at. The more I searched, the clearer it became. The signatures didn't match. The timestamps were off. The clause that allowed the transfer was added months after my supposed consent. Piece by piece, the truth arranged itself like a puzzle I didn't know I'd been building all along. Tara hadn't just borrowed against the house. She'd rewritten ownership, using my parents as intermediaries to make it look legitimate. And they had gone along with it. I felt a strange calm settle in. Anger would have been easier, but this was something colder. It wasn't about losing anymore. It was about being erased. When the clock struck 9, I called Evelyn. She answered before the second ring. I read it, I said quietly. Her tone didn't change. And if we expose this, I said, it'll destroy them. No, she replied, voice steady. We're not destroying Clara. We're restoring. Truth isn't revenge, it's correction. I sat there holding the phone, listening to her breathe. She didn't fill the silence with comfort or strategy. She didn't need to. Her words had already settled in like something permanent. After the call, I opened a blank folder on my desktop and named it Audit 2, Restitution. Then I began to build the original deed in my name, the falsified transfer, the bank correspondence confirming the collateral, every message Tara ever sent. Each file went into that folder like a quiet confession, one after another, until my screen felt heavy with evidence. Have you ever found proof that changed everything you believed about your family? That single document that flips love into manipulation and memory into data? Comment Truth Revealed if you've ever uncovered a hidden betrayal, and how it made you see everything differently. By midnight, the folder was full. I printed each document one by one, hearing the low hum of the printer fill the silence. The pages stacked neatly beside me, pale and incriminating. When I finished, I slipped them into a manila envelope and wrote one line across the front. Attorney review. I leaned back and looked around my apartment. It was quiet, almost sacred, the kind of silence that follows acceptance. I thought of all the times I'd begged them to see me, to tell the truth, to love without conditions. Now I didn't need their version. I had the real one. As dawn began to touch the blinds, I whispered to myself, this time they can explain themselves. In court. The words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like balance. Hours later, I was back at my desk, the envelope sealed and ready. I thought I'd feel relief, but what I felt was closure creeping in like sunlight. Then a shadow moved across the glass door of my office. A knock. When I looked up, Tara was standing there, pale, shaking, holding the same letter from Evelyn. Tara stood in my doorway, trembling so hard her voice came out cracked. You went too far, she hissed. Do you even know what you've done? I didn't look up from my desk. My laptop screen reflected the audit folder like a mirror of everything she'd buried. Yes, I said quietly. I verified ownership. You forged a property transfer, Tara. That's a felony. Her face drained of color. The arrogance she always wore began to crumble. It wasn't me, she blurted. It was Dad's idea. I finally looked at her. Then you both signed it, I said. Either way, it ends here. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything unspoken. The years she'd spent twisting guilt into currency. The way I'd paid for peace like it was rent. Tara's voice wavered, caught between rage and panic. You'll ruin the family name! I leaned back, calm, almost detached. You did that the day you used our parents to commit fraud. She stumbled into the chair across from me, her body folding like something deflated. For the first time, she looked small, not because I'd made her feel that way, but because the truth finally had weight. I slid the folder across the desk. Here, I said quietly. Transparency. Every page is traceable. You'll need a lawyer. Her hand shook as she touched the papers. You're doing this for revenge, aren't you? I held her gaze. No. I'm doing it so the next time you destroy something, it won't have my name on it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I watched the realization settle in. The moment she understood I wasn't playing her game anymore. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was absolute. When she finally stood to leave, her voice broke. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said softly. It just makes me free. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and for a long moment, I sat there staring at it. I thought of all the times I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace, how silence had once felt like safety. But now, silence was mine again. Not a weapon used against me, but a boundary I built myself. The phone rang, cutting through the stillness. I recognized the number. It's done? Evelyn asked. Yes, I said. She knows everything. There was a pause, a calm one. Then I heard it, the faintest note of pride in her voice. Then Clara, you've learned what most people never do. Revenge isn't about hurting back. It's about reclaiming what they took, quietly. Her words sat with me long after the call ended. I closed the folder, placed it back on my desk, and stared out at the city beyond my office window. The lights shimmered faintly in the dusk, each one steady, unbothered, self-contained. When I shut my laptop that night, I felt lighter, not because the fight was over, but because it no longer lived inside me. Then my inbox chimed. One new message. The sender was unknown. The subject line read, Rivera Family Estate, Court Summons. I stared at it for a long second, then felt something I hadn't in years, peace that didn't need to hide. I smiled faintly. Finally, I whispered. The audit begins. The courthouse smelled like polished stone and old paper. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each sound steady, deliberate. I'd walked this hallway before, years ago, back when I didn't have the courage to open the doors I passed. This time, my hands didn't shake. Courtroom 3B was colder than I remembered. Across the aisle sat my parents and Tara. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Tara looked defiant, though her chin trembled. My mother sat between them, her hands folded tight, her eyes quietly pleading. Evelyn sat behind me, calm as ever. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Just knowing she was there kept my breath even. When the clerk called my name, I stood. The sound of my voice surprised me, clear, level, almost detached. I explained what had happened. The forged transfer, the loan, the deception that had tied my name to their lies. I laid out every file, every signature, every timestamp. I didn't need emotion to make it real. Truth had its own tone. Tara tried to interrupt. She's doing this for attention, she yelled, her voice cracking. The judge's gavel hit the desk once. Enough! I didn't look at her. I just said, if attention is what I wanted, I would have done this years ago. A faint murmur rippled through the room. Tara's mouth tightened. My father stared down at his hands. For a second, I thought I saw regret flicker across his face. Then it vanished. The bank's attorney confirmed my documents. Everything matched. The judge's pen moved slowly as he signed the order to freeze the property and the boutique's accounts pending investigation. I didn't feel victory. I just felt stillness. When I stepped down from the stand, Tara's eyes followed me. There was fear in them now, not of me, but of consequence. I'd lived that fear my whole life. Now it was hers to hold. Outside, the sunlight hit me like air after years underwater. Evelyn joined me at the steps. She placed a hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? She asked. I looked at the sky and smiled faintly. Like the air finally belongs to me again. She nodded once. It always did, Clara. You just stopped asking permission to breathe it. We stood there for a while, not speaking. The world kept moving around us, cars, voices, footsteps, but for the first time, none of it felt louder than peace. That evening, when I got home, my phone buzzed. A new message. My mother's name lit up the screen. The text was short. We didn't know what Tara had done. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time, the words blurry under the glow of the lamp. Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part remembered every silence that had cost me something. After a moment, I typed one word. Maybe. Weeks passed before I went back to their house. The drive felt shorter than it used to, quieter too. When I pulled into the driveway, the windows looked different, still, almost emptied of noise and pride. My mother opened the door. Her eyes were swollen but softer. She didn't speak, just stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like lemon polish, and something faintly burned, like she'd tried to clean too much too fast. My father was at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. For a moment, none of us said a word. The clock on the wall ticked like it was waiting for permission to move. Then my mother slid an envelope across the table. "We wanted you to have this." I looked at it, then at her. "What is it?" "Just read it," she said quietly. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, written in her handwriting. It wasn't long, and it wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something. "We see now that love isn't about rescuing. You were never cold, Clara. You were right." My fingers lingered over the words. I'd imagined this moment before, but never like this. There was no triumph, no swelling of relief, just stillness. I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. "I'm not angry," I said gently, "but I'm done saving anyone who refuses to stand." My father finally looked up. His voice was rough, older somehow. "You always were stronger than us." I met his eyes. "No, Dad. I just stopped mistaking guilt for love." He nodded, almost like he'd been waiting for those words. Then he looked down again, and I knew that was as close to peace as we'd ever get. When I stepped outside, the wind carried the smell of rain, the same scent from my first morning in Austin. I closed my eyes and let it brush over me, washing the years off like dust. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Evelyn. "Stage complete. Restitution confirmed." For a while, I just stood there, the sky gray but open. I didn't reply. Some moments don't need responses. They just need silence. I looked up at the clouds and whispered, "Not revenge. Closure." If you've ever learned that peace is louder than payback, this one's for you. Subscribe to Demanded Revenge for more stories where justice isn't shouted. It's earned. That night, I took every printed receipt, every document, every letter, and placed them into a single box marked proof. Then I sealed it, set it on the highest shelf, and turned off the light. For the first time in years, I slept, not dreaming of the past, but of nothing at all.